Hello, and welcome to this episode of Own the Journey, where we are interviewing amazing people from around the world and sharing their wisdom with you. And today we get the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Richard Ollis. Richard, thanks for being here with us this morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure to join you. I don't know about amazing people, but I'll try to do my best.
Well, you are quite the amazing guy. So for those that don't know you, talk to us just a little bit about your life experiences and what got you to where you're at today.
Oh boy, I grew up here in Springfield. I think the main life experience first that happened was joining the Navy. And that was a big, obviously pivotal point in my life. And then coming back and going to college, another, I think, pivotal point. And then going into business. And I have been in the same business now for over 35 years. And so as we talked prior to going on air, have learned a lot over that 35 years and frankly made a lot of mistakes that I've learned from. So that's kind of my life. The other thing I'd say is I have really had the benefit, and it's been such a good thing as I look back on it. I have gotten to work with family members in my business, and although they're no longer associated with our business, my father and his two cousins and my grandmother, and so what an experience for someone to really get to do that.
Yeah.
And so that was a really cool thing.
That is, and your business itself is the business of insurance.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And as I understand it, 4 generations have actually worked within the organization?
That's right. My great-grandfather founded it, and then his 3 sons joined the company, and then we had 3 other individuals for the 3rd generation, and then I'm the only 4th generation that was interested.
Yeah,
but
and the kids they're not in the...
They aren't. I probably, as far as family, ends with me, but we're employee-owned, and so we have another generation that will take over the company. It's just not going to be part of my, what I call direct family. They're an indirect family.
That's good. Well, let's take a step back. You talked about the U.S. Navy and your time in the military. Thanks for your service, by the way.
I appreciate that. You too.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pivotal part in my life as well. And so, but talk to us just a little bit about how that shaped how you grew into the business leader that you are today. Not only the experiences, the lessons, but for me, a lot of it was what I learned not to be, what I didn't want to be by seeing others. What was it like for you?
As I said, it was a pivotal point in my life. I joined when I was 17, and so I couldn't even sign the paperwork. My dad had to sign it for me. But the bottom line is I was adrift in my life, and so I joined, I don't think fully realizing what I was getting myself into, but some of the life lessons I learned, 1, showing up on time, 2, doing your very best when you are, at work. And then 3, establishing that routine. The military is very committed to routines. And I think humans in general like routine. And so, again, just those very things. The other thing I learned is that, your role, whatever it is, and I started off cleaning bathrooms, and then I washed dishes, and then I tied down airplanes, but my shipmates were counting on me to do that, right? If I didn't fulfill my role, then they couldn't fulfill their role. And the jet pilots who are at the top of the food chain were very important, but frankly, if I didn't tie down that plane properly, they weren't going to be able to operate. And so, those life lessons that I learned in the military that frankly I still follow today were invaluable to me in business.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the quick lesson that I heard there is it doesn't matter where you are in the organization, take pride in what you're doing, and everybody needs to be treated with respect throughout the entire organization because they contribute.
That is absolutely right. And I not only believe that wholeheartedly, but I like to interact with all of our staff members, and I'm sure we're going to talk about my city experience.
Yeah.
All of our staff members and people involved in that, because they all fill a very valuable role.
It's so good. I think that there's something invaluable to learn from those exposures, because when we start with how we're similar rather than how we're different, we can solve a lot more problems than so many of the I'll just say polarizing figures in the world today, who sometimes start from the differences rather than the center. So,
one of the other things, since you brought that up, that I will mention, and I struggled with this when I got out of the service for that first 2 or 3 years. You were definitely on the same team in the military, right? I mean, and your shipmates, it was a brotherhood, and now a sisterhood. And obviously civilian life is not entirely that way. And so I kind of struggled initially. I was like, wow, I thought we were on the same team here, and but again, if you can be on the same team and you can form that camaraderie, it's a powerful force.
And I think that actually not only helps us within our team and how we bring an organization together, but I would love to hear your thoughts about how that works in the sales process as well. Because when you start by building rapport and building a relationship, and then you're starting from a place of trust, not a me against them negotiation like you see on Wall Street.
I couldn't agree more. And another thing we just talked about is in that sales process, we call it a discovery process. If you can bring the people in that are impacted, right, in their organization and your organization, to get together as a group. Now, sometimes, folks don't want to do that, but if they will, it is an extremely powerful experience on solving issues, on determining if people have solutions to those issues, et cetera.
Right. I love that. And I think there's a lot of business owners that just try to put the paper across the table and get the signature. And we've learned over the years that that's not what it's about. It's developing those partnerships and really solving the problems for the front line, for the back line, for the business leader, for everybody in between.
It's not going to be sustainable, right, and long term if that's all you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, you mentioned your city services. So you've gone from business leader, military leader, to business leader, and now community leader. That's had to be a little bit of a shift for you.
It has been a shift, but it's been kind of like the military experience. I've learned a lot.
I bet.
And frankly, some of the lessons that I've learned there, I apply in business. And so it's been a rewarding experience, a challenging experience. Sure. And certainly the political environment today, it makes it, you have to be on your toes and have to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what would you say as a piece of advice for somebody who wants to consider getting into public service of some kind? What have been some of the big lessons that you have learned that you didn't know prior to getting into the community involvement at this level?
I'd say a couple of things. One, this is just my personal opinion, but do it for the right reasons. In other words, if you're upset about a particular issue and that's your cause, I don't think that's a good basis for public service. And I, really your goal is to look at the body as a whole, so to speak, and try to do the best you can. And then secondly, is one, and I know I ought to do a better job of this. One, listen, and two, and sometimes I literally will write this on the sheet of paper in front of me. Hey, keep your mouth shut. In other words, people aren't there to hear me pontificate about things. And candidly, if you're doing that, you're not learning anyway. And so listening and understanding. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, in my view, trying to make the best decision for the city or the organization as a whole, which is different than making the best decision for one neighborhood or for one individual.
I think that's good advice and quite challenging, I'm sure, because you can kind of alienate one group for the greater good, and that creates the frustration sometimes.
You bet.
Yeah, tough. I love what you said though, because I think that the idea that a leader should be the last to speak is a lesson that I didn't learn early in my life. I wanted to solve the problem and just just go. But I learned over the years that we have to sit back and listen, and we should always be the last to speak in a leadership role.
You know, and sometimes, even though you think you may know the answer or solution, really, a person wants to be heard.
Yes.
And so, and maybe you do know kind of the direction or solution, they still want to be heard. And just the fact that you're listening and acknowledging their opinion is meaningful.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and listen to understand, not just listen to reply.
Right.
Yeah, love that. Well, let's shift gears a little bit into the insurance world. It obviously, over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of changes. There's lots going on. So for our small business owners that are out there that are trying to navigate through this, first, what's some of the foundational advice that you would give them to make sure that they're properly protecting their business?
Well, I like to say, you know, that at first, analyze risk, and insurance is just an outcome of that analyzation.
Okay.
And so as you look at your business, there are some very basic things, right, that you likely need to cover, whether it be property, liability, auto, and those types of things. However, as you kind of analyze things, frankly, contracts are beginning to be an exceptionally important part of risk for businesses.
Tell me about that. Why, how does that have such an impact?
Because what happens is, as business owners and leaders, we are asked to sign contracts, right? Whether it be with vendors, clients, supply chain, all of these various issues. And inevitably, when something bad happens, even though you've got the insurance policy in place, the first thing that is asked for is the contract. And the contract is going to delineate how that risk is then, frankly, assigned to each party. I have seen some really bad outcomes because of a contract. In fact, but one of the worst outcomes I've ever seen is a PO that was signed for a piece of equipment that was delivered.
PO, help us to understand.
Purchase order.
Oh, okay.
And so basically, some person is delivering a piece of equipment.
Okay.
They go in the front desk and say, "Hey, I need you to sign for this piece of equipment."
And they just sign it without
right. Just sign it. Well, on the back of it, it basically said, you are going to indemnify the equipment owner and hold them harmless for any and all liability. Well, that piece of equipment cut somebody's arm off.
Oh my God.
Yes. And what happened is it should have gone back to the equipment manufacturer because it was a malfunction. But guess what? Because of that purchase order and the signature on it, it went right back to the business that should have been compensated and the individual that lost their arm. Again, it was a purchase order. It was signed by someone that normally does not sign contracts for the company, right? They just happen to be there. So that's obviously an extreme example.
Sure.
But contracts are exceptionally important and something that is often overlooked.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. I think, we've worked together as great partners for a long time. And one of the things that you helped us with is you actually asked for copies of those contracts so that we could send it to the carriers providing the insurance to make sure that their legal counsel gave it the thumbs up, that there wasn't any unnecessary risk.
Absolutely. And so again, and think about what we're talking about here. We're not talking about necessarily insurance, but the contract is going to delineate how the insurance responds. And so again, I think the old process of buying insurance through quoting is an outdated and frankly pitted with errors and pitfalls.
That's really good advice. One of the pieces of insurance that you helped us to put in place was directors and officers coverage. Talk to us just a little bit about why that is so important for a business, especially as they begin to scale.
You bet. I will tell you, particularly as businesses, as you say, begin to get larger and scale up, decision making is important, right? I think of directors and officers and fiduciary liability, right, as decision making coverage. If you don't do your due diligence and make a prudent decision, and we all make mistakes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you can be sued as a director or an officer, and someone can allege financial damage. Obviously, the more high-level business transactions you get into, the more risk you're taking on for the decisions that you make. And so protecting the company and its officers and directors, if you have a board, is exceptionally important as you continue to grow.
Yeah, so breaking that down, if somebody found that a decision was made poorly, they could not only sue the company, but they could sue the individual where they would have to come out of pocket.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because something I don't think we understand as business leaders is we can be held personally liable for the decisions that we make in a business, meaning that, as you say, not only is the business sued and has to defend that suit and maybe pay a judgment, the individual can be sued and have to defend it, very expensive,
Out of pocket,
and pay a judgment, and that directors and officers can fill that gap.
Yeah, that's good. Obviously, one of the things that we know a lot about, because we've been in the game, but you have helped to navigate through these policies, is the changes with cyber liability and major risks for organizations. What have you seen just within the last 2 years as it relates to that?
It has been a roller coaster ride in the world of cyber. And I'll just say, to kind of begin, that when I first got in the insurance business, we were concerned about a physical threat to our building, our contents, right? Tornado, and it was localized, right? That physical threat came locally or maybe regionally. Now, in the world of cyber, frankly, data and the value of it has eclipsed what my building or my contents is worth, right? If I lose my data and the ability to operate on my operating system, each day, hour, frankly, that goes by, I am losing thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of dollars. It has become so important to protect that asset. And the other thing, as you know, the threats that are coming at us, particularly over the last several years, like you mentioned, whether it be ransomware, social engineering, where someone is duped into something, bank accounts being hacked into, or frankly, voluntarily. CEO fraud, right? All of this has really started to escalate, and frankly, the insurance companies didn't know, to be candid, what they were insuring until the last several years, and they're like, oh gosh, we had no idea the exposure that we were really taking on here. So the whole game has changed.
Yeah. I think one of the big challenges for business owners in today's world, knowing this, and the price obviously has gotten quite high as it relates to getting this insurance in place, is how much coverage is appropriate for the business, and how do you come to that decision in working with someone like yourself?
Yeah, I will tell you, number one, I think you need to look at the financials of the company to determine what you literally have at risk and the future earnings of the company, right? I think that's a key component. And then secondly, the industry you're in has a lot to do with it too. Obviously, being in the managed service business, there is a significant risk
yeah.
associated with healthcare, big risk, right? Taking credit cards in a retail option, big risk. Educational institutions, big risk. Utility company, big risk. There are other industries that aren't at so much risk. And so, it's an analysis that we go through with the client and, frankly, some of our insurance carriers to determine what that right level of coverage is.
Oh, that's outstanding. I think that one of the things that a lot of people don't know, and I was talking to one of our clients who was really struggling on whether or not they should put the insurance in place at all or not. Just they didn't understand it. Like we think we've got all this security in place, we've protected the network, we've trained our people. Do we really need the insurance? And what I shared with him was that it's not like a traditional insurance where something's broken, you determine what it takes to fix it, and then you get a check to reimburse what that is. It's not the way that really the team of people that come in, it's a consulting engagement that help you to navigate through a breach or a ransomware attack or something like that, where they're bringing lawyers and they're bringing cyber experts and mitigation experts, negotiation experts to help manage through all that, and they even helping with PR if it's necessary.
That's exactly right. And I think it's kind of twofold. One, just by going through the process of applying, you're going to find out as a business, do you have at least some of the right precautions and procedures in place, like multi-factor authentication, right? That's the big buzzword today. And then secondly, like you discussed, it's invaluable once something does occur to be able to pick up the phone, report it immediately, get an attorney, a cyber attorney that specializes, get a cyber coach, get a hold of your managed service provider, all of those things so we can mitigate and shut this down as quickly as possible to mitigate the damage. And frankly, if many businesses that don't have the ability to do that, minutes count, as you know. In fact, seconds count. And so if you don't have these things in place, it becomes very, very difficult, and most businesses are not equipped to do this on their own.
No, absolutely not. It's scary stuff.
Yeah.
So what other trends are you seeing in the industry besides that, in terms of, you shared things with us in the past that there's, things I didn't know about, like during Katrina, so many cars got wiped out, and so the cost of coverage for auto was going up. What trends like that are you seeing in the world today?
I'd say a few things. One, the reconstruction cost of buildings. If you haven't analyzed, frankly, your home or buildings lately to see what it would cost to reconstruct them, that cost has gone up dramatically over the last 3 years. And so, frankly, you can be woefully underinsured in the event of a loss. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
You mentioned auto. Now we're starting to see these multi-million-dollar jury awards on these significant auto accidents. That is a trend that we see happening. We talked about cyber. That is the hottest area of risk right now across, frankly, the world. I was going to say the country. It's a worldwide phenomenon, right? And then lastly, the ongoing issue around the employer-employee relationship with suits from employees.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I very first got in the business, none of the things that I really just talked about were issues.
They weren't there.
No, they weren't. And so, but today, that's why risk has become more complex. And frankly, it really does take a team of people to effectively identify, put plans in place, and then manage it and ultimately mitigate it or reduce it.
Well, one of the things that you touched on that I think is absolutely critical in today's world, you guys do a lot of employee benefit consulting. So the health insurance, the wellness practices and things like that, that's become a big part of employee retention, to the point that you guys have even extended your business offerings to offer HR consulting as well, to help companies navigate through some of the challenges that exist in today's world.
It kind of reminds me of what we talked about earlier, that an employee benefit plan is frankly just the outcome of an attraction and retention strategy. And what we've learned over the years is that sure, you can have a great benefit plan, and you should. I mean, that's a baseline for competing in the market. However, you've got to have the right policies in place, whether it be vacation, flexible work, right? Tuition reimbursement. There are a myriad of things that businesses need to consider. And so the benefits, though, is an outcome of that, and the baseline of health insurance. But what about, do you have short-term disability in the event somebody gets sick or pregnant and can continue on? What about dental, vision, all of those various things? And so it's a much more complex a situation. And as you mentioned, we really felt that we needed HR professionals to help us round out that offering. We also have a wellness coordinator, as you know. So it really is a full-fledged, full-time effort. And I'll even say that the world of medicine has changed a great deal since COVID. If you don't have a robust telemedicine offering where your folks can, from home, get on their computer and interact with a healthcare professional, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So anyway, just a lot of changes in that marketplace too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously all of these things can be a little overwhelming for a business owner trying to navigate through it. So working with someone like yourself and a professional that really understands it is really the difference. It's gotten to the point, in my opinion, where you kind of got your core competencies that you need around you. You always used to hear in business you needed a good lawyer, a good accountant, and a good banker. Well, in today's world, I think that extends to a good insurance partnership and a good technical or managed service partnership.
I think it's absolutely critical, and I'd relate it to our relationship with your firm. I nor my staff can be experts in IT. And could we hire someone? Yes. I don't have the ability to train them. The IT world is evolving so quickly, right? We don't have the ability to keep up with that evolution. I have to rely on an IT partner that is going to help us navigate this entire situation.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who is trying to find an insurance partnership that doesn't even know the questions to ask? What are the things that are important to look for in a good agency versus somebody that is kind of what we describe as a trunk slammer, that's kind of doing it out of the back of their car?
Well, I'd say, and there are great providers out there. The first thing is that, and then I think this is a key differentiator. Is this a transaction? Meaning, are we quoting and selling insurance policies, right? Or is this a consultative and an advisory relationship, right? Are we talking about contracts? Are we talking about the various risks in your specific company, right?
Right.
Are we understanding what your business and what the opportunities and frankly risks associated with it are? I think you can figure that out pretty quick with a 10 to 15 minute interview with a provider, and then secondly, you really want a team of professionals, and I emphasize team. If all you're doing is interacting with your person, meaning the agent, right, and that's your complete package, so to speak, I would say that's a sign that you're not being taken care of by a team of professionals and experts. And so those are the two things. And as you know, a really good relationship is one that they are keeping up with the changes in your business, and you view them as a partner. Mm-hmm. And on our end, we kind of have a litmus test. And the litmus test is, does our partner, does our client call us before they do something, purchase something, buy another business, etc., or do they call us afterwards and just tell us to handle it? If they're calling us afterwards, that's not a true partnership where we can advise them about some of the risk factors in whatever they're doing. And so that's kind of our litmus test whenever, and frankly, you know, we have it happen, and we'll try to get engaged and right, and do that. But it really should be in fact, I was visiting with one of our clients yesterday. He's trying to make a decision on something about involving driving, and it was good to be able to work through that with them and ultimately describe the risks associated with what they're contemplating.
Mm-hmm. And by having those conversations in advance, you're mitigating future risk in removing or protecting it properly if you decide to move forward. And so
absolutely,
you don't put the whole business at risk because of one unknown factor.
That's absolutely right. And ultimately, it's the business's decision, right? We understand that, but our job is to lay out the pros and cons of at least the risk side or the benefit side or the HR side of that decision.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Well, one of the things that you said was team. And I know that within your own organization, culture is huge. You guys have been in the top rankings in the Springfield area as the best places to work. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I know that you really charge on that. And as a part of all of that, you mentioned earlier, you guys are an employee stock ownership company.
Right.
Talk to us about that. That's something that a lot of people consider as they think about exiting the business, because there's some tax benefits to doing that, and they want to share the success of the company, but it doesn't come cheap or easy either. I know that there's pros and cons.
There is. I'll say a couple of things. First of all, we are very proud of our culture, but we didn't start there. And I just mean that, you know, it's a journey, and we and I have made a lot of assumptions that were invalid along the way, and hopefully, I think we've learned as we've continued to progress.
Kicking and spinning.
Exactly. An employee stock ownership plan is a wonderful tool, but like you said, it has its pros and cons. The pro is that everyone in the company has a stake in the outcome. Everyone is invested. The cons are it's relatively expensive. Secondly, it requires a lot of work, not only from an accounting and legal standpoint. If you really want it to work, your communication and how you're disseminating information has to really continue to improve over time. And then lastly, you absolutely have to plan extensively for future buyouts of stockholders, right? And so it requires that financially you are continually putting money aside for the future buyout of stockholders, because unlike a privately held business where your exit strategy might be somebody buying you out, right, or somebody internally buying the business,
right,
you're really waiting for a bank transaction or somebody with money to come in and pay. Not in an ESOP. You are retaining earnings to buy that stock out as it as people retire out of the company. So pros and cons, but overall, I love the sweat equity of an ESOP.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. So how do you handle somebody who's been in the organization for 5 years and decides to take a different opportunity or needs to move out of the area because of family requirements or whatever it may be?
You know, a couple of things with an ESOP, and obviously it's continuous promotion, but after 5 years, you know, they have a little bit of a nest egg. 10 years, I will tell you, is the magic number. That's where somebody goes, wow, this is going to be a big part of my retirement and a big part of my financial picture. So after 5, you know, the bottom line is that there is a payout associated with that you have to plan for. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, you know, everything, I guess, is a balance. But frankly, once they get past 5 years, if they like the company, they're very rarely do they move out or move on. I mean, and that's not to say it doesn't happen, because it does.
Life happens.
But the percentage is diminished.
Okay, that's awesome. So good. As a part of all of that in the strategy that you guys utilize as an organization, not only as a community leader, but you spend a lot of time just in the community, volunteering in different areas, helping out, networking. What advice would you give to small business owners who want to get out into the community to make those relationships? And how critical has it been to your success over the years? Well,
I'll say a couple of things. We're very much in a relationship type of business, right? We become part of the team of our clients, and so it's exceptionally important that we build those relationships. I will tell you, networking is not for everyone, but I think it's exceptionally important. I'm sure you've heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
For sure.
Now, I don't believe 100% of that, but I will say this: if you have relationships in the community and in the business world, it can make a big difference in your company. Mm-hmm. Whether it's attracting clients, gaining some valuable advice, getting an introduction to someone or some resource. Mm-hmm. The list could go on and on. So if it's not the business owner themselves, I would certainly encourage, for you to have a purposeful plan around networking and relationship building, because it can make such a difference. And frankly, you're going to learn lots too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Going to get out there. And I think it's challenging for a lot of business owners. What I found over the years is that there's a lot more introverts in the world than I ever thought. It's not natural. And so your advice if it's not your thing to get out there as a business owner, make sure you've got somebody on the team.
Yeah, we talk about this internally, and candidly, when you walk into a room and there's a crowd of people, do you go, oh, this is going to be fun. I am going to go meet some people and I see Johnny and Susie over here? Or do you go, oh, is there a table over there in the corner that I can kind of go sit at? And, that will kind of tell you, frankly, whether that is kind of your natural trait. Now, I'm not saying that if you are an introvert, that you can't learn some techniques in order to be better at networking. And I think even as a introverted business owner, you still have to do some of it, right?
Yeah.
Now, probably not to the extent of someone that's a true extrovert, but you need to at least do some of it. And so, as you know, energy level is something that can tell you if you come out of a situation like that and you're exhausted and you got to go home and, take a nap, that probably tells you that, this is something that you're going to kind of have to work on. But again, I'm sure you have these conversations. In fact, I know you do. If it's not your thing, then maybe someone else in the organization can kind of pick that up. Right.
Yeah, well, I had heard some good advice one time that I think it was actually Simon Sinek, who's naturally an introvert, and he said all he does is he goes to those events with an extrovert so he can just kind of tag along, and that way he didn't have to be the guy. He just talks and eats cheese and lets everybody else do the talking. And
that's funny because some people, they don't want to interrupt the conversation. Well, you kind of have to interrupt the conversation, right? Exactly.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, I think one of the things that's helped you in the community that I wanted to ask you about was your relationship with your wife, Teresa. So she's amazing. Being in the public eye, going to all these events, being a business leader, it's tough. Talk to us about what it means to have a good support structure, a good partner in your life that helps you to navigate through some of those things.
I can't say enough about having a good partner. It's not a game killer, but it's a game changer. And not only for me, I'll say that as we look at some of the best and most critical people in our company, they all have a successful partner that is navigating life with them. And so, having that person that is a support system, because as you know, there are going to be ups and downs and trials and tribulations, and having that individual. In fact, just last night, we went out to a public event. She went with me. She is more introverted, but it doesn't mean that she goes to everything or all things.
Sure.
But she's there to support. She's there to visit with, and we talk about a lot of things. And I can't say enough about that relationship. I know you have that relationship with Michelle, and I just say I think it's a really important part of a successful, frankly, life.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I know it's a challenge to get on the same page sometimes, and hey, I'm going to go to this thing, and I don't, the other one, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be in the public eye, whatever it may be. But you just have to work through those things.
You do, and it doesn't mean they have to go to everything, but there are things that, frankly, are going to require, right, them to go with. And I'll kind of tell this story, and Teresa would tell this story if she was here. Early in our relationship, we had a conversation around that very thing, that this was the likely direction of my life and career, and hey, if we're going to get serious, we're going to have to work through how we would interact and handle this situation together. And so, and she has been, an active partner the whole way, and hopefully I have for her too. Yeah. And so it's a good thing.
Yeah. So I love that. Good advice to get on the same page early in the relationship so that you know how you're going to attack the problems like anything else.
I'll even tell this story, many times we like, when we're hiring a key person in our company, to invite, if they are married or have a significant other, we like to go out to dinner, see how they interact, talk about how they work together in their relationship.
That's good advice.
And frankly, I have found that the really successful people normally, it's not unequivocally, but normally have a significant other or support system, right? It doesn't have to be that, but they have some sort of support system, because you just can't do it alone. And then, frankly, I kind of laugh at this, but I have a support system at work. I've got a support system at home. I've got a support system at the city. I've got a support system, you're included, of business people that I rely on and ask questions to. I think it's really important.
No, that's awesome. Thanks, Richard. Well, wrapping things up, one of the questions I like to ask is, what's the best piece of advice that you think you've ever gotten, or one of them?
Oh boy, I think it's fairly basic, but I'll tell this story, and it's a Navy story. As I said, I joined the Navy when I was 17. I went out to the ship. It was a John F. Kennedy. It was an aircraft carrier, so big one. So here we are, group of young kids, frankly, and we go down, and they're going to kind of train us. And this old crusty chief is down there, and he says, he said, I want to have a conversation with you guys. At that time, only men served on combat ships. Now that's changed.
Yeah.
But gathered us all around and said, hey, we don't have many rules around here, and we're pretty liberal about how we kind of go about things. He said, let me describe what that looks like. He said, now, as I said, we're pretty lax about this, but if you, for instance, if you have a death in your family, he said, you don't need to call us. You don't need to tell anybody. You don't need to do anything. You just go do what you need to do. He said, now let me describe what that means. He said, when we talk about death in the family, we're talking immediate family, and we're talking about you. He said, otherwise, we expect you to be here. Well, obviously it's a silly story, but the simple fact is that if you show up and you do your best, good things happen. And if you'll just, there's more to it than that.
Absolutely.
However, it's those basic things that I think, and I've learned, make a successful life, make a successful career. That's why when I say I'm going to do something, and we've all been there where we're going, oh God, I said I wish I wouldn't have said I was going to do this, right? Because I've got to go do it. But the simple fact is, said I was going to do it. People are either counting on it or at least expecting us to be there.
Right.
And you need to deliver on that. And so I really believe it's really about the simple things. Mm-hmm. And that is certainly one of them.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Richard. Thanks for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna raise a glass.
Okay.
And say congratulations to you for owning your journey.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you.
You bet.
Cheers.